So it's still very grey today, January 31st, 2017. Yesterday finished the recording of the 5th partita. I'm very pleased with that. And I did some re-recordings of some parts of the 2nd partita, the Capriccio, the Courante and the Try the Sarabande, but that was too much. I didn't want to start yesterday with the 6th partita, which is a monument, of course, on its own. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on tape. So nothing to complain about, I guess. I have to thank you all for commenting on Facebook, on YouTube, or on my personal mail on my question of the value proposition. It was great to hear feedback from you, and I would like to chat with you a little bit today, chapter 2 about this. You know, I'm following a course now with Tim Schmoyer. You could check his YouTube channel out, it's videocreators.com, it's his website, but it's also his name on YouTube. And so Anya and I following that course because I have to see if I'm focused, because we don't want to do things wrong, in the sense that YouTube is a platform with its own way of working, and we want to understand it very much in depth. It's the platform we're using. So, and I see all these aspects. If I am doing all that effort to make those videos, those productions, like we're doing now with partitas, but not only that, it's also the productions for YouTube. It's of course very nice to do, and I would not want to miss that anymore. But if you want to talk about making a kind of business model around what you're doing as a musician, choosing YouTube as a platform to reach out, or one of the platforms, I think it's part of being a professional musician in understanding that platform really in depth. And Tim Schmoyer is one of the YouTube certified people. There are not so many, I guess, and this is really intense. I've never thought it would be possible to be really impressed with the way this is going. And its strange thing is, it brings me to my own roots. You could say maybe my belief system, talking about primal branding. Tonight we have a live conference with the author of that, Patrick Hanlon, of the Primal Branding. That's a must read, I think, if you're an artist or a musician. I will link it in the description box. So he's coming to listen to our questions, but the point is, I have a lot of questions, but it's like one big cloud of questions, and it's difficult for me to point one out. And moreover, this value proposition is about how can you stand out, but in a way that people know exactly not what you're doing, but why you're doing it. So of course, I guess if you're watching these videos now, you are, so to say in marketing terms, my most smallest niche target audience. And so you know what I'm doing. And if you follow me somewhat longer, you know my cause as well, in the sense that it's obvious that we try to come as close to the voice of the original composers, but that's not the only thing. It's also to share the kind of rediscovered beauty. But the interesting thing in this Video Labs course is that those people come from a different niche. They are very, very specific target audiences, and that's how they never have heard of playing Bach on another instrument than on the piano. So it's interesting and hard in a way to explain to them what I'm doing, but that's a good exercise. And so the value proposition I came up with, so you had two types of what. Continue the research. We've talked about it in the one of the previous sessions of videos. I will link that if you haven't seen that and would be interested to check it out. Continue the research, mastering the craft. Great comment, that's mastering the 18th century craft. It might be a good addition to that, because the technique changes late Beethoven, Schubert maybe, but anyway, that's a detail. And then converge to the composer's voice, which also I got a side remark that maybe in terms of grammar, it might be a little bit off. But anyway, and I was thinking about that and saying, is that really what I stand for? And so I start thinking again about things, how to communicate what I stand for and find out what I really stand for. I mean, that's hard. You should try it yourself. And what you stand for is not I just play classical music on period instruments. That's what you do. That's the what. And audiences of today, people of today, even customers of today, that's one of the great one-liners of that book. They value experience more than the actual products. So the experience is giving the direction of what's your passion. Why are you doing what you're doing, and why should I care? And of course, the bottom line of what we do, if you're a musician, you know that we couldn't do anything else but what we are doing. That's our cause in life. That's what we sometimes believe, maybe that we are born to do so. That's big words, but you know the feeling that if you are not on track with that in your life, with that mission, you sleep very bad. You know what I mean. So how to explain and how to find out what I am doing? And then I realized once, many years ago, when I was in Amsterdam at Conservatory, having a colloquium, so a symposium, dealing with tempo. You know, that's a big deal for me. I believe that there is a lot to be researched, and we're going to, not today, but announce a major project for authentic sound on that. So the direction of it will give direction also on the things that we are doing. But Clemens von Gleich, he was now very old, he's approaching the 90s and he's not in very good health, otherwise I would have interviewed him. But he came up with a beautiful, a brilliant comparison that made clear what we are doing. And not only what we are doing, but how we can differentiate, because not everybody is doing it in the same way. And that's, of course, that's logic, makes sense. And so basically what he was saying, he said, at that time there was a restoration of the Night Watch by Rembrandt. So Rembrandt, the great 17th century Dutch painter. That's a beautiful, one of the most famous paintings worldwide, hanging in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. So I've seen it a lot of times when I studied in Amsterdam. It's a gorgeous painting, and I only have seen it in that condition. The condition was, at that time, there was a restoration of that painting, which of course was a big deal, because it was one of the most famous, most valuable, most iconic paintings of Amsterdam, of the Netherlands, maybe still today is. So, and what they did actually, but the restoration was not too much, they peeled off all the century-old layers of varnish. It was painted with new varnish layers over and over again, and they just added a new layer of varnish using the same composition in materials that Rembrandt could have used. So there was this painting again, and it was a shock to many people. And why? Because the Night Watch before the restoration was a very dark, mysterious painting with, of course, a bunch of guards that were waiting to go on their round. And so many theories and books have been written about how Rembrandt had really touched with his genius palette those brown, dark, shady colors and mystification. And what happened now with the new layer of varnish, it was a splendid, bright painting. So nothing of those theories could stand. And that's a terrific comparison, because first of all, the original layers, that's also what's been added on the music of Bach and Mozart and others. And that's a normal thing, because history is also always about evolution. we are the generations, and maybe the generation before me, who started to look back. Started maybe also with Mozart, but that's another topic. But really to start back, looking back in a way to reconstruct what has gone. So the same thing as with the restoration of the Rembrandt, peeling off the layers of varnish. But here's the interesting part. It's of course much more difficult with music than with the painting, obviously. With the painting you just peel off the varnish layers until you reach the paint itself. That's the fact. So once that last layer of varnish is away, you are with the original hand of the master. Maybe some colors have shaded over time, but in generally spoken, you could say you touched really, you shaked hands with Rembrandt then. With music, of course, we don't have Bach's execution of his works, of Mozart's rendering of the piano concerto. So we are only there with the score, so it's much more difficult. How many layers of varnish should you peel off? And I strongly believe that the first generation, so the 60s and the 70s, 80s, those people, the great musicians, they got also a platform, don't forget, of record companies who saw really big money in that new niche and still had the money to give them a worldwide platform, which would be hard today. But they grabbed it, they took it, and what they did is really monumental. I think only future can show what they did. But in a way, they started to peel off varnish layers. And of course added their own, because that's what we do as musicians. Only taking off would give a very empty score. You could say here is a score of Bach. But then the interesting part is the interpretation, and that's the personal aspect which makes it interesting. But I'm kind of convinced that every generation has its own timestamp. And so the first generation of hip musicians, they had to fight the piano bastion, you know. I've been in Amsterdam, which for organ, but certainly also for piano, is a kind of elite conservatory, you know. And if you are there in the piano class, don't come up with your own interpretation. You have to play it. And all the students that come out of such a conservatory, they play exactly the same, in a way. But own accentuations, own tempi, new stories is not accepted. Maybe today it's different, but in the 90s it was like that. And in the 60s and 70s it was even stronger, because there was not such a thing as old music. There was only evolution. So those people had to go back. So that's a great thing. But how far did they go back? And what is the nature of the additional varnishes that they added on top of everything? That's an interesting question. Because take the Rembrandt with the dark and shady colors. That you could compare with today's execution of Mozart symphonies, Brahms symphonies. Maybe Bach is different because that's kind of taken out of the symphonic orchestra world. But if people go to Carnegie Hall here in Brussels, to Beaux-Arts, or the big concert halls, they get a brown version of the Night Watch. That's what people want, because they are emotionally attached to that. Completely understandable. So peeling off these varnishes is also a painful thing for people to do. Or to realize, because people are emotionally attached to the performances they really admire. So the addition of the varnish layers is very important. And I believe that the first generation of hip musicians are of course children of their time. They have had also an emotional attachment to the music they knew. And so how many layers did they peel off? And today, we of course 50 years later, 60 years later, we can tell that there might be some layers left that should be taken off, or could be taken off. It's everybody's free to do what he or she wants, or he or she believes. For instance, the research to tempo, that's something that you almost never hear a lot of talking about. It's like we have to feel it. The the accentuation patterns. I'm not a specialist in that, but I know only from reading text from Beethoven that there is a lot of things that that are ununderstandable. Temperament, another thing. So there are a lot of things that we need to discuss, going back to the facts and put our own layers of varnish again. And secondly, I also believe that some of those layers that have been added over the last 50 years might be maybe more a kind of way to differentiate themselves back then from the pianists than really what the 18th century would have done. It's of course not up to me to say that now in 5 words to you, but it's just a question. How many layers should you take off with Bach? Do we have taken all layers of the last 2 centuries away? Did we? I don't know. Sometimes I doubt. Should we add some others, or should we, other phrase in a different way, should we just experiment a little bit, add a new layer? After a while, when we don't like it, just take it off again. Open our minds maybe also to works of our colleagues in a way that if I play the Waldstein Sonata in a different tempo, that there is not directly finger pointing, oh, you don't have read Czerny because he has written metronome numbers, as if I did not know that. But listen to each other and opening ourselves in a way that maybe there are other sides of that music that we know so well that are hidden today. Again, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not pointing to someone. I'm not saying that I have the truth, quote unquote. But I'm just thinking of my value proposition. Would it sound nice or good or not cheap, because I'm a little bit afraid of that, if I would say that what I actually do is trying to peel off the layers of the past 2 centuries to reconnect with the past, or to reconnect with the original voices, something like that. And that implies study, research. But to be honest, again, I said that yesterday or a few days ago, I like to read all sources. They inspire me a lot. But I'm not the one who takes that as a first principle, and I don't think you should. It should recreate a context. It should give a kind of direction to your instinct, because that's also what reconnects with the past. There's a lot actually in this video. I've actually done my walk 2 times. So what's the thing of our time? What are we looking for? And how we can make the difference that perhaps the people in the 60s were geniuses in. They made a difference. And I'm not criticizing them. I really admire that generation. I mean, if only I would perform the works that Leonhardt has been recording, I would have a lot of work, I can tell you that. So no, I'm really very modest to them. But that doesn't mean that we should not find our own way, and how to communicate that. That was maybe today's topic. It's a little bit longer than normally, but it's important. So thank you for your feedback, and we'll come up with some ideas in the coming videos and things that we want to take authentic sound in the direction. So we'll see. Thank you for your support, all of you, and these walks really do me well. 6 partita is waiting, and I'm waiting too. See you next time. Bye.